Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today, and it's time for another Scuffed meta snapshot. Now I will say not too much has changed from last month, I think, and while the meta maybe hasn't completely settled and, not all of the decks for every faction are, completely apparent. I haven't seen a lot of decks for certain factions on this patch. It's safe to say that everything is, pretty similar to last patch. Since not too much was changed. I've been struggling a little bit as to what should go in Tier 1, Tier 2, because I think a lot of decks are very similar power level. A lot of decks are playing very similarly. We've got a lot of lists which are kind of mid-rangey, or doing a bit of everything. They have removal, they have big engines, greediness, and they have just pure point slam. Most decks these days are kind of doing that, so they're all quite similar, I think, in power level popularity. I have put scoia'tel as Tier 1 just because I think this was kind of the catalyst for, every other deck playing a lot of tool removal and trying to punish the greed, because, as I'm sure you know, Nature's Gift is a very greedy deck with Hammer Dryads. If you don't have answers for these cards, they're just going to carry games if you play scoia'tel. Deck's pretty much unchanged from last patch, although I've seen people experimenting with things like Pavco Gale, some of the 5p Dryads, I don't even know what they're called, the Guardians. Yeah, some people are playing those here and there, but, it's pretty much the same thing from last patch. Very greedy deck, and a lot of removal and answers to the opponent's stuff as well, with Heatwave, Rockside, Rebukes everywhere, and of course that powerful Symbiosis leader. So I think this deck has sort of shaped the meta in some way. A lot of decks have to be good against this, otherwise they're just going to take a loss to it, and that's incentivizing Heatwaves everywhere, tool removal, Rocksides even in certain decks, 5p damage cards, etc. But I think this deck is pretty similar in power level to a lot of the decks I have in Tier 2, so don't think it's that much stronger or that much popular or anything like that. It's more just sort of a meta-defining deck, I would say, on this and the last patch. So next up we've got Tier 2, so this is basically all of the good decks, and there are quite a lot at the moment. These are the decks that are just pretty damn playable. They'll win a fair amount of games, they can hold their own against the other decks. Some are more or less popular. Syndicate in particular is not very popular despite being quite strong, so keep that in mind. First here we have Keltolis, which, Magpie's version here. I'll just refresh because it's bugged. Magpie's version has become very popular, and it's the sort of standardized version of Keltolis. Some people run slightly different versions to this. Keep that in mind. I also played a Vivienne Oriole version with Sienna as well, if you want to check that out. I've got a video on it. But that's probably a bit weaker than this version with Heatwave and Wrath. Again, you're playing a greedy deck with all the greedy engines, and the Skyrim music's popping off, but and you also have the removal for the opponent's stuff, so similar thing to what a lot of decks are running these days. You've got to have those tool answers, or you're just going to get bullied out by certain decks. But yeah, Keltolis, pretty strong one, getting the card advantage, and Kelly being very good against some things, weaker against other things like scoia'tel in particular, can be a little bit iffy. Alright, next up we've got Shieldwall, which again is not really too dissimilar to how it's been last patch. Just kind of running those dueling units along with Veraxis, Shieldwall, Corvo is usually in the deck to provide a bit of long round threat. And yeah, another very scary deck with engines, with removal, with pure point slam. Got a bit of everything, so that's kind of how most decks are operating. Northern Realms is more engine heavy with frigates and Anna and Corvo and stuff, and you don't have that pure Heatwave, you're relying more on the duels, which, I'm going to turn this music down a bit because it's kind of getting a little bit intense. Okay, but yeah, there's Northern Realms, not too different. There are other things you can do with it, and I haven't put Uprising in here, but I think you can do Uprising at the moment, and it'll be reasonably successful. Next up we've got Skellige. Most people have shifted now to Patricidal Fury instead of Rage of the Sea, due to the nerf that Rage of the Sea got. Patricidal Fury is very decent because you can run Champion's Charge, you can run you know, Madman Lugos. So you've got those control tools again, which every deck these days tends to have. You've got to have that tool removal in there. You've got to have the answers to the Hammer Dryads, to whatever else greedy stuff. You are going to be playing Devotion, so that's going to mean you miss out, unfortunately, on Heatwave. So you might struggle a little bit against decks that are requiring Heatwave, you know, for example, Monsters. Keltolis and of course Haunt shenanigans are going to be quite hard to deal with without Heatwave. But yeah, Skellige's pretty decent still. I wouldn't say it's, you know, the strongest it's been, but it's holding its own for the most part. You can also play Greatswords in Hjalmar if you want and try Rage of the Sea stuff. It's still probably not too bad. Alright, next up we've got Overwhelming Hunger. You've got different variations on this as well. Some people play Ruahin, some people don't. Some people running no Ozrael Haunt, no Ozrael Egon, which is what I've got here. This is sort of a more Deathwish heavy deck with Manticore and Maruna and Werecat. And it maybe should be running Beast as well. That's something you can think about. But this is, yeah, sort of a more Deathwish heavy. You've got the Frost. Some decks won't run Frost, most tend to, because if you're Devotion with Oberon, then you go for that. You can also not run Oberon, you can run the Ozrael Egon stuff. So different things you can do with Overwhelming Hunger, but the premise is the same. You've got the big Haunt value with some really key Deathwish units that can be very annoying for the opponent to deal with. And if you don't run Heatwave, that can be a downside, but you've got Wrath there potentially if you want it as an option to deal with tool units. And some people even run Geralt Heatwave, sort of skipping on the Devotion version of Overwhelming Hunger. That's something you can consider as well. But yeah, Overwhelming Hunger is very good. The leader's just worth a ton of value, so pretty strong stuff. Alright, next up we've got Syndicate decks, which, you know, not too popular. You've got some sort of half bounty things here. You could even go more all in on bounty if you want to do that. Quite a lot of people like the Siggy Caesar combo, which means you can get disrupted if they kill your Siggy, but otherwise you're getting a huge amount of coins, a huge amount of value from that little combo. But yeah, as I said, Syndicate, not too popular at the moment. This is a Witch Hunter and not a Sewer Raider, by the way, just for clarification. But yeah, Syndicate's pretty good. You can try this Graydon package. You can also play without it. You can play with Heatwave and non-Devotion, and there's not really any reason for this even to be Devotion, so you can even throw a Neuromancy into Syndicate. Lots of things you can do here, kind of personal preference. With Pirate's Cove, you can also go for Hidden Cache still. You can play Passiflora still, perfectly reasonable, still pretty strong. Just got to make sure you have that tool removal in there, which is why I've thrown in the Heatwave here. But yeah, Hidden Cache is still pretty decent as well. I haven't really seen it too much, but it's not received any changes really, so as long as you have the tool removal, the tool punish. Passiflora is not as good as it used to be, but it's still a good card, you know, and you're threatening at those players that don't play Heatwave in particular, and even against Heatwave scenarios are still pretty good. So yeah, still a decent option for Syndicate as well. And now moving into tier 3, got a few decks here. Lippy Skellige is a thing that I've seen a bit of. You've got this kind of tool removal Lippy with Heatwave and Curse of Corruption, which is kind of interesting. Don't have to run Curse, but it's kind of a hidden gem, a little, you know, sneaky card that gets you quite a bit of value. You can also run Geralt or Igni or whatever you prefer. But yeah, this is like a super thin, heavy Lippy. I haven't played it personally. I have played against it, and it does have a lot of points, as Lippy does. You're of course trying to get that double Ceres going and have that as finisher after thinning out big time in round 1, trying to push it and punishing the tool decks a little bit with these, you know, tech cards. Pretty decent deck, but I don't think it's anything too crazy. Quite punishable if it loses round 1, and yeah, sometimes lacking points as well. Next we've got Mill. This is just my Mill deck. I think this is quite popular for Nilfgaard. I don't really know what else Nilfgaard is running at the moment, and by no means is Mill that great. I don't even know if it is worthy of being in tier 3. It might be more of a tier 4 deck if I had to place it. But, you know, I think Nilfgaard is so starved for options at the moment. Mill is a pretty fun option. And I think other people are playing Assimilate here and there, but I don't have a concrete list for that. There's some double cross assimilates being played. You might choose to do some bull stuff. You can go with soldiers and Imperial formation, or even no units. But none of these things are super competitive, I think, and there's not one concrete list that Nilfgaard has that I'm happy sharing. But, you know, here's some mill if you want to play some mill. I think everyone is kind of in agreement that Nilfgaard is pretty weak this patch. It's kind of the weakest faction by a significant amount, I think. And, yeah, you can play mill. You can play Masquerade Bull and get points. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. There's just not a common list right now. That might change as the you know, as the patch develops here and people experiment and find some things. But yeah. Next, we've got sort of control Northern Realms with Curse of Corruption, Heatwave, Rockslide. Not sure how common this is or popular, but you've got decks that sometimes run double Revenant, otherwise they're just running the one, and you've got, you know, Forbidden Magic. You're basically Revenant deck with a lot of control tools, and you're going to try to spam engines on the board for the most part with Adalia and Mobilization, and then control the opponent's engines and hope that you get a win there. Don't think it's super strong, and probably doesn't have too many amazing matchups, but it's a deck that can win. It's not too bad, and it does punish some things very severely, like potentially Keltolis if they don't see you coming, and you can rock slide their Ciri, you can Curse of Corruption their Keltolis, etc. So has some decent matchups, by no means a terrible deck. And finally we've got Congregate, which again is something that you can consider if you want to go wide instead of Tool in this meta, although you're quite often playing Fallen Knights which go Tool anyway. Don't necessarily have to run those, and you can go more for trying to dodge the heat waves and stuff if you'd prefer. But yeah, decent deck, nothing too special. Payday being a card now does probably help this deck become a bit better, and you can consider running Portal or not if you want. There's a lot of different cards you can consider in these Congregate lists. I'm not really an expert on what you should play here, but you know, you got some pretty big bomb cards. You can have a great long round if you're able to get there, and it's a different style of Syndicate if that's something you're looking for. But yeah, sorry about not really having Nilfgaard decks for you guys. I think this patch is just a bit sad for Nilfgaard, honestly, but I might be mistaken. There might be some things lurking here and there. Let me know in the comments if you think you know of something that's pretty decent for Nilfgaard, or any of the other factions. But with that being said, hope you enjoyed the Scuffed meta snapshot. Thank you to all my wait, they're over here? Yeah, they're over here. Thanks to all the members who have joined the channel. I really appreciate that support. Just takes the pressure and stress a bit off of me having to, you know, make videos to get by. But that being said, also thanks for subscribing, guys, if you do that, and hit the like button, etc. That really helps. Anyway, have a great day and enjoy the decks. I'll see you next time.